Today on Locked On Canadiens, should the Habs look to hire an associate coach, and how good is the prospect pool really?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1114 of Locked On Canadiens. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day every day. As you know, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day. Remember, free and available. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. My name is Laura Sab, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm not joined today by the wonderful Scott Matlev, Habs Eyes on the Prize, but he will be back next week. We'll be doing the Craig Rivet trade tree together. We were planning on doing it today, but he had some technical issues, and I didn't want him to miss out. We're going to be doing that on Monday, but also next week we have got Tony Ferrari coming back, and we're going to talk so much prospect stuff with him. I know you guys love him. We love him. We adore Tony, and we didn't want Scott to leave the show without having one last not debate. We don't even debate. We just listen to him talk and get educated. And we wanted one last Tony Ferrari party. And as you know, my co-host Ian will be starting at the beginning of August. So we're getting really close to that as well. Lots of excitement coming up. So make sure you are subscribed to this podcast. And tell your friends, tell everybody Ian's starting. Ian's coming on. Let's give him a warm welcome. All right, real quick. We are going to get into some mailbag questions, and then a little bit later, I am going to play a clip from Sebastian talking about the Montreal Canadiens prospect pool as a whole, and then I'm going to talk about that clip afterwards. So please stay tuned, but in the meantime, let's start with our mailbag questions. I'm only going to get through a few today, but don't worry, all the ones we have that are backlogged, we will talk about on Monday, and I promise you that Craig Rivet trade tree is coming because it's so fun to talk about. I just love that. I'm trying to pull some other interesting Canadiens-related trade trees just so that we can be ready for that episode, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more to talk about, but all the mailbag questions that have not been answered and will not get answered are coming. I know there's a couple of YouTube Jack Eye face punch. Hi, I do have your questions as well, and they are all coming. But let's start with a question from longtime listener and good friend of the show, Claude S. Hi, guys. What do you think of Gerard Gallant as an assistant coach for the Habs? I firmly believe Marty needs a veteran coach on the bench to help manage the bench in-game and give the special teams a boost. To this day, I don't understand why Vegas fired him. He had a .601 winning percentage at the time. He has a career .576 winning percentage, which includes 3 years in Columbus and coincidentally one Trevor Letowski. I'm not sure if it would fly, but I would name him associate coach and pay him $1 less than Marty if that's what it took to get him off the couch. Now, an experienced associate coach for Marty is a fantastic idea. Over the course of this past season and the season before, we've had a lot of praise for Marty and we've had some criticism for Marty. And the praise usually comes in terms of motivation. Like every single one of those players would run through a wall for him. He wouldn't even have to ask. He'd just have to look, right? We saw when he returned to the team after his son needed him. He returned to the team, how happy the team was. They couldn't stop talking about how they came back to the hotel and Marty was there to surprise them. They were on the road. I believe they were in Colorado at the time. Motivation, not a problem for Marty. Fantastic. He's amazing at it, right? In terms of development, we're seeing improvements in the players' little in-game habits. We're seeing overall the players are getting better. He's really fantastic at that. Where we have criticized Marty, and we're not alone in this, is his in-game decision-making, because we don't feel that he's experienced enough at this point to be a master tactician. He's really smart about hockey. When Kent Hughes talked about the conversations they used to have before hiring him and why he decided to hire Marty, just the way his hockey brain works, it's fantastic. But I think the experience is what's lacking, and with experience, you become a better on-ice tactician. So we criticize some of his in-game decisions, whether it's what line he puts out, what situations he puts them out against, what pairings he decides on, etc., etc. So yes, the special teams are a problem. That's something which is more institutional, I believe. And then there are little things like the defense that's also kind of personnel related, and the fact that they don't really have an identity and they don't really know what they are. But the in-game tactician part is something that I think the Canadiens need an experienced coach to kind of, improve that. Now, with Gerard Gallant, there's a couple of things. One is, would he even accept being an associate coach for the Montreal Canadiens? There are a lot of coaches, head coaches, that have gone on and done that. Jacques Martin was one of them. Sylvain Lefebvre was, well, I guess he was an AHL coach, but ended up, seeing success that we were like, well, what even is that, right? We see a lot of coaches, head coaches or former head coaches, go to an associate coaching position and then end up winning Stanley Cups, right? So like if Montreal wants to be a high caliber team that's a constant contender, perennial contender, I think it's intriguing to have that as an idea, bring in a master tactician. But I feel like that would happen a little bit closer to when the Habs are contending. I don't know that it would happen now, and I don't know if Gerard Gallant would accept. Another thing with Gerard Gallant is there seems to be something really weird about the fact that he gets a lot of success, but then it gets old, right? Like the teams stop absorbing his message. Maybe he doesn't have anything new in the tank. I don't know what it is, but there's a shelf life with him. So I would want to ask more questions about that. Like if I were the front office, obviously not me personally, Laura, it doesn't matter. But Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon should be asking those questions if they were approaching a coach like that to join the front office staff. But Claude, I always love your mailbag questions because they always give us food for thought. I truly look forward to them all the time. Even if you're just sending a comment and not really a question, sometimes it makes us think, and it creates a reason for us to have an episode, or it creates a segment for us. So I really appreciate, Claude, you're such a good friend of the show. Thank you so much. You are often our mailbag hero. And I think this one is a good, and then maybe listeners, you can let us know what other former head coaches or maybe former associate coaches that have a lot of cachet or a lot of a relatively decent reputation. What coaches would you want to kind of be an associate coach to Marty, but also mentor him in a way? That role is not just to be a tactician, it's also to aid Marty's growth. We've got a couple more questions from Zach M and Xbox B that are draft related or prospect related. So we are going to tackle them with Tony next week. But I do have one really fun question from our good friend Robert Rice. I will ask Scott this, but as I am the Montrealer, I feel a little bit more like this is aimed a little bit at me. And Robert's question is, you're designing a goalie mask for a Canadiens goaltender. What iconic symbol of the city do you add to the mask? Personally, I would favor a mural of Schwartz's on one side. So I think there are a lot of them, you've got Schwartz's, you've got the Great Bagel War between St. Viator and Fairmont. Obviously, on a goalie mask, St. Viator's going to be the one that makes it. I get it. There's a lot of stuff. There's the Olympic Stadium. There's a lot of stuff that's associated with Montreal, but mine would be construction cones, because that is what I associate with Montreal. That is something where everybody always comments on the construction. I was just driving home today and the construction was just off the charts. It's something that everybody kind of, comments on. It's something that we as Montrealers have to always contend with. It's just something that is so prevalent in Montreal, to the point where I do believe that Montreal's you've got construction cones as mascots in Montreal. And when my sister's actually an artist and she creates items, things like tote bags, mugs, stickers, that kind of stuff. And a lot of that art that's Montreal related has construction cones on it. That's how iconic it is. And I didn't give her this idea. It's just a thing that I think about, right? So that is what would go on my goalie mask. And then, obviously, with Montreal, like you can't go wrong. Like you could do the landscape, you could do like Mount Royal, you could do the cross up on Mount Royal. A lot of people do that. In terms of food, there's no shortage of food that's associated with Montreal. I'm sure if you asked Scott, he would say the poutine from Poule Mouillé should be on the goalie mask, but just things like that, even in terms of bring your own wines, like maybe a wine on there or something. But if I was designing a mask, I would definitely have a construction cone. All right, so what you're going to hear in our next segment is a clip from Sebastian talking about the Montreal Canadiens prospect pool as a whole. But in the meantime, oh, sorry, that's coming up next. I'm so sorry. I'm going to talk about it after. It's Friday. Give me a little bit of grace. It's been a long week. So that's coming up in just one moment is Sebastian's lovely prospect pool analysis. And then I'll share my comments a little bit later. But first, this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's listen to Sebastian talk about the prospect pool as a whole.
Alrighty, let's dive straight into the prospect pool here because there is so much to dig into. This might be a bit of a quick fire round because of the sheer amount of depth that Habs have in their pool. You could probably build a future NHL lineup purely from players in the Habs system that have yet to play an NHL game. Probably would be the best lineup of all time, but it would probably be an NHL lineup once these guys all like develop to their peaks in a couple years' time. Let's start off with the forwards because this had been the weak point in the prospect pool prior to the draft, but no longer looks like that whatsoever. With Ivan Demidov and Michael Hague added into the fold, you get two dynamic potential top liners or top six guys. I think Demidov is almost a slam dunk top liner at the end of the day. Michael Hague, I would give about a 30% shot of being a top liner and another 40% chance of being a second liner, with the remaining 30% being a bottom six depth skill type of role. But very, very interesting, skilled, intelligent, hard-working players that still have runway as well in their development and still have to round out some weak points in their games, but have so much to be excited for and provide a ton of potential scoring punch down the road. Beyond that, you have a variety of potential bottom six or middle six offensive pieces that aren't all going to be Habs in a couple of years' time. A lot of these guys are going to go unsigned as free agents, going to get traded because of the sheer amount of depth in this pool. I think Owen Beck is a guy that will stick with the Habs long-term as a really intelligent two-way center who combines a high degree of pace and speed and intensity with defensive awareness, defensive engagement, and offensive intelligence. He reads play really well. He's able to leverage his speed to create space for himself. And while he doesn't have dynamic offensive skill, when he has space to work with, I think that he's a really, really intriguing player offensively as well. Think of him along the lines of a Paul Byron playing center long term. I think this is a guy that Habs fans are going to fall in love with once he becomes a full-time NHLer. And I mean, he already has one NHL game under his belt when he was called up as an emergency guy in Ottawa about a year and a half ago. But beyond him, you have Sean Farrell, a guy who's been developing nicely with the Laval Rocket in the AHL. Intelligent two-way winger with a real playmaking touch. Oliver Kapanen's going over to the SHL this season to develop if he doesn't crack the Habs lineup out of camp. And after that, he could be a really impactful AHL presence in Laval, a good two-way center with good goal-scoring instincts around the net, uses his intelligence and frame really nicely to contribute to the buildup of play in all three zones, and he gets to the dangerous areas. He is able to contribute defensively as well. Really solid potential middle six centerman long term. Vincenz Rohrer is a highly intense winger, can also play down the middle, and he moved from the OHL playing with the Ottawa 67s to the Swiss National League last season, where he won a national title there as a third line player, and his intensity, his grit, his intelligence are all just fantastic things to have on the ice. And I think he'll be a fantastic bottom six piece long-term that you just love having out on the ice, whether it be on the penalty kill or at even strength. Philip Meshar has struggled in his development at the OHL level, but is going to look to make an impact in the AHL with Laval this upcoming season, hopefully while playing with players that can read the game at his level and find the spots that he wants to find them in as a playmaker, will allow his development to really start charging back up again, because if he hits his upside, this is a really, really fun middle six winger, but the progression over the last 2 years is a bit of a cause for concern. And quick fire around here, we have Atos Koivu, as we mentioned in the last segment, as well as Logan Sawyer. Cédric Guindon is an intelligent centerman who can play on both ends of the ice. Luke Tuck will be making the jump to the Laval Rocket this season to provide a punch of physicality and energy as a north-south winger in a bottom six, middle six type of role. Xavier Simoneau continues to chug along his development and will hopefully be seeing some type of call-up minutes this upcoming season for the Montreal Canadiens with the intensity and intelligence and physicality and intelligent physicality that he brings to the equation as an undersized forward. Florian Jacki has been developing very nicely as well, making the leap to the AHL with his entry-level contract. I'm very curious to see how he continues to develop, because he is just so violent and has a decent amount of skill and goal-scoring touch as well in his toolkit. And Makar Kanin, as I mentioned, is a dynamic Russian winger who was drafted in the 7th round this year. And Riley Kidney still in this organization as well as an intelligent and dynamic potential forward down the line. So a lot to look forward to in terms of the forward pool now, and a lot of depth more than anything. But the defensive pool is also where things stand out a lot, whether it be Lane Hudson, who one of my favorite players to scout ever. I adore this kid, and I think he's going to force his way into the NHL lineup in training camp because he's just that talented offensively, and the Habs want to build that type of talented offensive style. David Reinbacher will hopefully get a full season in the AHL with some degree of consistency in his development after a pretty rough season playing with Cloton last year in the Swiss National League, which was not a good team. And having a full season in an environment where he can learn to build chemistry with other players that will be Montreal Canadiens long term, I think will do him a lot of good. Adam Engstrom, another really, really fun and smooth skating defenseman that I think has second pairing upside. Very intelligent in how he's able to create offense. He's able to leverage his mobility on both sides of the puck in all three zones to create advantages. Logan Mailloux has a wicked shot, great handling ability and mobility. The offensive potential is really high with this guy, but obviously the defensive game still a bit of a work in progress, needs some more reps, but he could even be a third pairing NHLer this season if he cracks the lineup out of camp. We'll see what happens in that dogfight between him and Justin Barron in training camp. And we'll wrap that up with the defenseman with Bogdan Konyushkov, who is still chugging along in the KHL as the captain for Torpedo Nizhny Novgorod, playing alongside Anton Salayev. And I think that in about 2 years' time, when his contract runs up, he's going to be a shoo-in as a third pairing guy in the NHL and has second pairing upside if he really hits. And Owen Protz could be a type of hard-nosed, hard-hitting bottom pairing defenseman if he really turns out as well. I'll be curious to see how he develops with Brantford in the OHL. But moving on to the goaltenders, again, we have some elite level skill here in Jacob Fowler, one of the best goaltending prospects in the entire NHL, who was dominant for Boston College in the NCAA last season as a college freshman. He'll be looking to build off of that season this upcoming year, and I think that he's going to be the future starter of the Montreal Canadiens. Jakub Dobeš played a pretty solid second half of the season for the Laval Rocket after a pretty rough start to his professional career, and I think he's also a guy with NHL upside. And beyond him, you also have another 3 goaltenders that I think are interesting projects to kind of build on. In Yevgeny Volokin, the Russian goaltender picked last year, Quentin Miller, the QMJHL goaltender picked last year, and Miklas Vekvanags, the Latvian goaltender, will be playing in the QMJHL this season. In terms of needs for this prospect pool, I don't really know what's missing. I think a lot of the pieces are now in place. A lot of it is just a waiting game now, waiting for these players to make that leap to the NHL level, maybe adding in one more top 6 projected forward into the prospect pool with next year's first round pick. And I mean, they have 2 of them. One of them might be a solid asset to trade in terms of getting a more NHL ready piece. But I think as a whole, this is an A+ level prospect pool. There's nothing missing. There's depth. There's elite upside in all positions, whether it be at forward, on the wing, at center, left D, right D, goaltending. Everything is here. The depth is fantastic. The future of the Montreal Canadiens is very bright. And this Kent Hughes-led management group has certainly reinvigorated the prospect pool of this lineup.
And we'll have a lot more on what Sebastian just said in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. But first, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Honestly, when I'm buying tickets, I just want to find a good deal. I want to find a ticket to the event that I want. I want a seat that doesn't have anything blocking me. I want somewhere comfortable. And I want there not to be hidden fees. I cannot tell you how much I hate hidden fees. Enter Game Time, because I can tell you Game Time has taken out all of the stress from buying tickets. And it can be about anything. Like, I like going to baseball games in the summer. And a lot of times I don't know in advance because it'll be a road trip, right? I don't have a baseball team in my city, so I'll take a road trip. Where do I go to find tickets to see if I can go to a baseball game in the city I'm visiting? Game Time. What if I want a deal? What if, I want to go to a concert in my own city? What if I want to go to a hockey game? All of that kind of stuff. And there's so much going on there. They have last minute tickets. They have flash deals. They have zone deals. It's very easy to find any ticket for any kind of event, including, Major League Baseball, summertime baseball. You get like the view from your seat, like from the app, you can see, right? So you'll know if you're going to get anything blocked, etc., right away. And you know that they're going to give you the lowest price guarantee, and the all-in pricing, to me, like, just that hidden fees, like, everything about buying tickets could be inconvenient, but it is so convenient thanks to Game Time. So check out Game Time and take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets or any tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's talk about what we just heard from Sebastian. So I have just a slight disagreement with Sebastian. So he gave the Montreal Canadiens prospect pool an A+. Obviously, that includes this year's draft class, right? Like, picking Demidov really catapulted them higher. They already had a pretty deep prospect pool. And we've had a lot of prospect experts say, like, the Canadiens have a lot of depth. They have a lot of depth. They do. But we aren't yet at the point. I think this upcoming year is the point where we ask the question, not what depth do they have, but what they do with that depth, whether they develop it, whether they trade it for assets in the future, et cetera, et cetera. But I just think there's one thing missing, and that is, to me, not a true number one defenseman. There are number one defenseman potential players in this prospect pool / on this team, depending on which one of them you're looking at. They can be a number one defenseman, but I want the guy that's always either winning the Norris Trophy or is the runner-up for the Norris. We don't have that extreme game breaker, right? We don't have Nicholas Lidstrom. We don't have, Roman Yossi. We don't have Victor Hedman. We don't have Cale Makar. We don't have that guy, right? We want that guy. That's the only thing missing, really, because I think everything else is accounted for in this prospect pool. So really, that's the only gripe I have or disagreement I have. And like, I love Sebastian, and I have so much respect for his and Hattie's analysis, and I always check out Locked On NHL prospects, even when they're not talking about the Habs, because I want an idea of like what's up and coming, right? Like, which prospect should I be coveting, that kind of stuff. So I really do agree with it's not just that I agree with them, it's that I defer to them because they do have that expertise. Speaking of prospect experts, we are having Tony Ferrari on the show next week. We're going to record on Monday night, so if you're listening to this and it's anytime before Monday around, let's say, 6 p.m. Eastern time, please send us prospect questions for Tony. We will ask him the questions, and we're so excited about that. Anyway, all of this to say, back to Sebastian's analysis. So one thing, if I were to think about a theme for Sebastian's analysis of the Montreal Canadiens prospect pool as a whole, there's a couple of things. Like, one thing that he has said is the word tenacity, right? Every single one of these players has tenacity. And whether that is in a game, an in-game situation, or whether that has something to do with their attempts to make the NHL, right? Like their growth, like how they approach their own growth. There's so much tenacity up and down the Montreal Canadiens prospect pool. But I think the overall theme of the way the Montreal Canadiens kind of pick players, the way that I see it, it involves a lot of hockey intelligence. All of these players have high hockey IQ. And a lot of times, like when we look at the picks that they've made over the past 3 drafts, like this front office, like sometimes the knock on the player will be like, oh, his skating isn't as good as we want it to be, or his hands aren't as good as we want them to be, or et cetera, et cetera. But every single player that they pick has the ability to think hockey, like they're hockey smart, right? And I'm thinking of, players that can anticipate play, or players that can create play, players that know where to be, like positionally, just all of that. Like overall, like these are smart hockey players. They do favor skill, and it's not that this front office shies away from size, right? Like people always complain, oh, the Montreal Canadiens are always like picking small forwards. No, they're not. They're picking a balance, and some of these guys are small, but they make up for that, right? And then when they pick a small guy, they are also picking very large guys at the same time. Like it's never a matter of the Canadiens just going for a small scale player. Like they are trying to balance it out as much as possible. Sometimes you get lucky and you get a skilled player who's also quite large, like a Uri Slafkovsky. Sometimes you do get that, but a lot of times, like I just find that the Montreal Canadiens really want people who think hockey intelligently, who know what they're doing on the ice, and like they worry about the other kind of developmental stuff, like that'll come. Like they'll just, they'll work with the development team, et cetera, et cetera. So the two things that really stood out to me were tenacity and hockey smarts. Like these are players that are determined to make it to the NHL. You just look at like Elaine Hudson and kind of just like the chutzpah on that guy, right? Just that kind of stuff. And I think, when the Canadiens have a really deep prospect pool, and I just think the only thing like separating them from an A to an A+ is really that defenseman I'm looking for. They may never find him, but they've got everybody now. Like the Demidov really did a lot for their draft. Can I say not draft capital, but their draft accomplishment? Let's say their drafting expertise or drafting pedigree. I said expertise, I meant pedigree, right? So that's all for today's show. And remember, if you want to send us mailbag questions, it is lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com is our mailbag. You can also find us on Twitter, follow us on Twitter, and also send us mailbag questions there. It's LO_Canadiens. You can also find me all over social media. I'm at The Active Stick. You can find Scott at Scott Matla. You can just send us questions wherever you find us. Make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And always make sure that if you are listening to us, you should also be listening to our sister shows all over the Locked On network. Especially, Sebastian is from Locked On NHL Prospects. I want to thank everyone for listening, and we will be back on Monday.